The Survival Guide to Life.
Hey everyone, how's it going? We got another episode of the Survival Guide to Life, and this week we have Victoria Rivera. She's a wellness psychotherapist, and she coined this term because of her holistic orientation and her mindfulness and her meditation. She works to understand how we as humans need rest, diet, and bringing all of this together in a holistic way so people can be spiritual, mental, and physical and bring that awareness in each and every one of us. So I wanted to thank you for coming on the show, and I appreciate all your time, Victoria.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
So how long would you say you have been a psychotherapist?
For over 15 years. I don't like to say how long specifically, but keeps people thinking that I'm young.
Oh, yeah, I mean you are. So, and then in that, from when you first got into the field to now, what, if at all, has there been a shift in like the way the approach has been given towards like a patient?
Oh yeah, there's been a big shift. When I first started, we really were working on this evidence-based treatment, which is like cognitive behavioral therapy or acceptance and commitment therapy, which actually I practice, but as a way of kind of telling people that you have some sort of disease. It was a medical model. You have depression, and so what you do is you go to therapy for 6 weeks, 10 weeks, or whatever it is. You take medication, and then you are cured. But what we know now is actually human beings are much more complicated than that. And depression doesn't just mean that there's some sort of chemical imbalance. There could be a variety of things that are going on, especially at the same time, that affect people. So I think what we've learned over the last 15 years, 20 years since I've been practicing is that people are much more complicated and much more need to be looked at holistically. And that's why in my practice, that's what I do is help patients understand that, they're coming in to feel better because they feel anxious or depressed or overwhelmed, but there's so many different aspects of their lives that need to be looked at. And it's not just about their mood and their emotions.
Okay, so that makes a lot of sense. And in like regards to like just depression and anxiety, more like trying to like alleviate from like medication, like say for example, like say SSRIs. I was speaking to this other doctor, and they're just saying that you can't really weigh the benefits to the negatives, and because when you actually look at it on a scale, it's like far more worse than you. Rather, if you go down this holistic route, even though it may be harder to tackle on at first, in the longer run, it's more beneficial.
Well, I think, our brains like to say either or, and I think it's more of all and a combination of all, because I do see people who are on medication and who need to continue to take medication. There is, with depression and with anxiety and mood disorders, there's a biological component, obviously, and we don't understand it all. We really just don't. And so my approach is, if you need to take medication like SSRIs or, medication for mood stabilizing medicine, I think doing that initially, especially when you're not feeling well, is so important to get you out of that, like, most of the time when people are like, for example, pretty depressed, they might not want to get out of bed. They might not be eating or taking care of themselves or sleeping well. So there's something that does need to kind of get them out of that space. And then from there, they can get the energy to holistic things, which would be like meditation and acupuncture, yoga, like depending upon what the person needs and what speaks to them in terms of a treatment form, whatever that is.
Okay, no, that I guess I didn't I should have thought a little deeper for the reason being because when you were saying that, it just made me think of my aunt who, like, when like the pandemic was like sort of like in the beginning stages, kind of like just went silent and wasn't like talking to anyone, like when my uncle was telling me. And he said it happened once before, and it was like he said it's like something in the family. And then when you said the biological thing, I guess that's where you can't really have one major like approach to it. Rather, you have to take
Oh, I
each
think I lost
patient.
you.
Rather, you have to take each patient differently and take it. I guess you can say with like a cup of tea.
Yeah, yeah. Well, look, I mean, I think it's so normal for our brains to want to say, "Oh, this one thing is going to help me, and then that's all I need, and I'll be happy for the rest of my life." And that's just not true. And I think in our society, we actually encourage that. So, there's so many ways in which this happens. Like, you find your dream job and you're never going to be unhappy. You find your dream partner and you're going to live happily ever after. I think just with life generally, and with therapy, and with what you choose to kind of help you to make you feel better, you hope that I'll do this one thing, I'll take this medication, and then my life will be so much better, when in fact it's a combination of things. So, and that's, I think, the most important thing is understanding how our brains actually work, so that we can work with it and understand that part of the process is, okay, well, medications work for now, but I do need to add other things, like I said earlier, to kind of increase the longitude of I guess, I would say, I don't want to say a cure, because that's not really what it is, but of living a more meaningful life, feeling like you have meaning in your life on a daily basis. And I think that that's like what, I work to help people to understand.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Like, instead of like coming in and then looking at this end all goal and just be focused in on that, and not getting to that right away would kind of stop someone and, like, I guess belittle their like growth. So instead you have their mind in on the macro and the micro, and like what they're doing, the little things they're doing every day, and how that's sort of like slowly getting them back into the place they need.
Exactly. Yeah. Because it's the little things that we do every day that, like, accumulate. If you eat like cheesecake every day, you're going to have some problems. But if you take care of yourself and you do a yoga practice every day or meditation practice every day, again, the long-term effects of that are going to be, well, I think in the long run, it's going to be positive. Eating cheesecake probably will not be positive, but it's that similar concept, right? You do something every day that, the cumulative effect.
I guess, yeah, in that aspect. So it's like I would really hope that like the cheesecake approach would be that of benefit, because I really like cheesecake. But in, like, I guess within psychotherapy, is there any like subject matters within it? Like, is there like a cognitive approach or like a behavioral approach or anything like that? I don't know too much about it, which is why I wanted your expertise.
Yeah, definitely. So look, we're so complicated as human beings. We have this thinking brain, we have this body, and we have our emotions, and we have other things that I think we don't really quite understand yet, like energy, and what happens when you're around somebody, or things that are unconscious that you pick up on that you don't even really know. So what you do, what we're trying to do is really just like sit down with ourselves and try to understand ourselves as much as possible, so that we could make decisions that are in the long run going to be good for us and move us towards not just our goals. I think that's as humans, we always have like goals that we want to kind of work on. but also towards our values too, like our values in life. And that's something that you can actually work on a daily basis, right? A goal, usually there's some sort of endpoint. Value is are you continuing to live your value? And I think that you kind of said with your cognitive, like thinking part of your brain, your behavior and your emotions, that is a really great start to work on some of the other aspects that we don't really quite know about, like this energy, what kind of energy you're giving off, what kind of energy, I'm sure you've probably had experiences where you've met somebody and the energy, you can't quite put your finger on what it is, but something in your gut and your brain says, oh, this person's kind of got something going on that I, need to like step away from. Or somebody who has like an amazing energy and optimistic and very like caring and loving and fun, you want to kind of attract, you're attracted to. So I think some people call that, maybe the more spiritual side of us as a being. So not only are we thinking, feeling, and doing, but that there's that spiritual, energetic side. That's what I'm kind of like referring to. That's not quite tangible, but that's what we work on when we work on kind of helping people to understand themselves, is all those aspects of themselves and how to get more in alignment with whatever goals they have or what values they have in their life.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And just in the approach of, trying to tie in, like physical and the mental and the spiritual together, what brought you to the conclusion that like it's not just one thing, rather it's everything together?
Well, I could say, being a human myself, the process, I've been in therapy for a long time, and as you grow in your own therapy and in your own life, you notice things, right? You notice things about yourself, you notice things about other people, you notice patterns that you're engaged in. And so, I often, it's a challenge because I only imagine what other people's experiences are. The only experiences I actually have are the ones that I've gone through, right? And are my perceptions and my like understanding of things. And so first you have to understand your own before you can understand how other people might perceive or see something. And I think this was really evident, over the last couple of years where, we're kind of all getting this similar information and people are interpreting it in different ways. And I think that's, if you understand how you interpret it first and have an understanding and compassion that given your experiences in your childhood and your life and what you've learned up until this day, understanding that helps you to understand how other people could potentially get the same information and have a different conclusion about it. And I think that that's the real key, is if you are able to understand yourself better, you're able to understand other people better. And then you're able to, if you want to, kind of change opinions, help people feel better, work on, helping them to take care of themselves in some way. I'm not saying that that's what you need to do, or be of service in some way to community. That's not necessarily a goal for everybody, but that, in my opinion, is something that we're placed on this earth for, is like, how do we, I always talk about this. We don't understand like why we're here. And it's kind of crazy that we are here, but a lot of the different philosophies and religions would talk about like, know thyself, the kingdom of God is within. Like, knowing yourself helps you to understand and work better with and understand other people. And I think that that's, at the end of the day, probably what we most want to do, is let's just have good relationships with people and live like a good life, and whatever that is for each of us.
No, I wouldn't have said it better, because um, if you really try to look at us as a what we are, maybe creation, or just like some people want to say, we evolved from something, but whatever it is and whatever you believe in, if you just look into yourself, you know that, like, okay, we're kind of are like spiritual beings, like in this, like physical, like life that we're living. And if you just look at like the feelings and just base things on the feelings and the feelings alone, when you are helping another person and you're helping them from the right place of the heart and it's authentic, then you could say that the feeling that's driven from after helping someone should be enough to tell you that this is maybe why I'm supposed to be here, you know? And it, I guess you can't really have everyone like look in your point of view, but that's not really the, I guess, point of like life. It's more like trying to understand yourself, like you said, and by understanding yourself, then you can better approach other people as well as be more mindful, because like sometimes
Mm-hmm.
you'll notice things like how you feel in a certain way and stuff, and then you'll be around someone and then you'll go out of your way just to make sure they don't feel like that, and then they'll kind of notice of like, oh wow, he's going extra just in case like I don't think like this, and then I'll sort of do that sometimes. I'm like, yeah, this is right here, just in case, like in case your mind thinks like that. And then people will tell me like, oh, like, that's weird that you're like, like I was
Mm-hmm.
just thinking that. And it kind of made me want to ask my next question is, and I know it's not too big as in like, taken as, okay, this is going to be how we're going to classify people and use it as an approach, as in, um, the personality as of a person. And do you think that like that can really be like put in a chart, and like you can say if this one's like this and that one's like that? I mean, I guess you can use it as a basis, but wouldn't you say that it really is like every person's unique to their, and they have their, each person has their own approach that's different from the other?
Right. Yeah. Well, yes. I think that that's probably a good assessment, is that it's a good base. I know if you're talking about the Myers-Briggs or like the Big Five, which is another like kind of like personality spectrum that psychologists use a lot. And there's so many different personality tests. I don't even know all of them. DISC, I think they do a lot for like work. I know a lot of corporations, they do a lot of corporate work with corporations, and people will come up to me now and they're like, oh, I did this assessment at work and this is the type of person I am. And I think it's very helpful. And you're right, it's a good basis for understanding yourself. So, if you work, you're a little more organized than other people. Like I know for me, I am definitely much more free flowing. Like I can't, I have a hard time like doing things in a linear sequence. So, but other people, they're able to do that. And that's how having that structure is very helpful for them. So I think kind of understanding that part of yourself is just like the tip of the iceberg of the other things that you could learn about yourself. Like you could learn, oh, the reason why I'm so organized, and she, would have all the cans of vegetables like facing that way, and that helped me feel like more secure. And I think that's what that can help you with, is understanding how you are and how that has probably developed from your upbringing or from experiences that you've had. And it's interesting, right? So say you don't want to be so like linear, you don't want to be so organized that you feel like you're too anal and people are always complaining about it, your partner or somebody like that. Then you can say, oh, okay, so my mom did this was a sense of security for me, but for my husband or partner, it feels like, I'm controlling. And understanding that is like just so helpful. So I think that you're right, like having that basis of these personality tests, but just taking them with a grain of salt, right? Not everybody can fit into these, square pegs that we have. We're all so unique. And I think like why you do what you do, and having an understanding of your patterns can help you immensely, particularly with work, but most importantly in relationships with other people, because again, like we were just talking about, like at the end of the day, that's what we value the most. Sometimes we forget that, but that's the value, is the people that we love and care about.
And then just in like your own clients or just the people you around you and just like your own like analysis, what how have you seen a shift within themselves, like mentally and spiritually, like before and like after like
Oh.
sessions? Like before and after sessions, like say if someone came in and then they spent like 6 months or like a year with you, and then like before and after, like what were like some of like the like main like things you would notice in like most of your clients?
That they feel like they have a better understanding of themselves, and they're able to communicate that to people, and and that they're working at a job or like towards a purpose that they feel good about. I think that that's what I've, when I work with people, that's the goal that I have in my mind. And eventually we do get there in some ways. And I always think of therapy too, is that it's not like you start a year, and then a year from now you're totally 100% better, or your life is great and amazing. I think things happen, people die, you lose your job, you lose um, your sense of stability. Things happen, and so you come back and you work on understanding how that's affected you and impacted you at your life at this time. And then maybe another year, 2 years from now, you stop therapy and you're better, and you might come back after that. I mean, it really depends upon life, right? Life is so complicated and unpredictable. We just don't know like what's going to happen. And that's why I think, we struggle so much with putting things in boxes. Like our brain wants us to have certainty. And I talk about this a lot because, during COVID, this year has been very uncertain. And the one thing I think that people keep on saying, which I totally understand and get, is, oh my gosh, we can't wait till this year ends and it's over. In some way, I think our brains are thinking, oh well, once 2020 ends, then everything will end, this whole thing will end. But it's something about it that is a final date that gives our brain some sense of certainty. And I think that when you get off kilter again, when you feel like you don't have that certainty, then you probably will end up coming back to therapy to work on getting that sense of, it's not even certainty, like maybe a sense of security or safety, and understanding yourself a little bit more and how to kind of reground yourself. It's probably the best way to phrase it.
Yeah, even in those terms, I would say therapy is not just something you just like finish in a year or like finish in 2 years. Rather, it's because maybe someone's seeing a therapist after like a long time, and there's been like decades and decades of like bottled up like emotions and traumas and all these things, underlying things, whether it be self-limiting beliefs, or whether it be like external factors from when they were young, and all these things are coming into play now. With having bottled it up for so long, I could only imagine how much effort and time it takes to actually sort of get somewhere and start like taking steps towards a direction of recovery. But in that terms, and like the terms of the ones who sort of like see the light in the end of the tunnel, and towards the ones who are like, oh, it's why is it me, like this is just my luck, you know, like I'm screwed. Like everyone else is fine, but this is just what it's going to be for me. With people who are having these type of thoughts, what have you found to be effective to sort of come from a place that they can understand as well as being benefiting to them so they don't stay in this like mindset?
Yeah, that. I think that's a really great question, and I wish I had like a concise, clear answer for it, because I think that that's like that's money right there. That would be, something that we could all use. It's funny because when you were talking about like mindset, who came to my mind was Carol Dweck. I don't know if you've ever read that book. It's called Mindset.
Okay, no, I'm
Have you
glad.
heard of it before?
No, I'm glad you mentioned.
So this woman, I think she was an educator or a psychologist, a researcher. I can't remember. Her name is Carol Dweck, and she talked about mindset. And then there's two sets of mindsets. One is a growth, and the other one is a fixed mindset. And I think what she was saying is kids who did better in life and felt more satisfied as adults, I think, it could be wrong, but people just generally who have more of a growth mindset seem to be happier and more content. People who have a fixed mindset, which means that they don't really try new things, they don't feel like their effort is going to be worth anything, that they have a harder time. They're just more stuck in life. And I think one of the things in terms of working on changing your mindset is understanding which type of mindset you have most of the time. Because I think we can have a fixed mindset in some ways, but we can have a growth mindset in other ways. And what areas in your life can you have more of a growth mindset? And we know now, I mean, the research totally is out. Our brains continue to grow even as we get older. In our senior years, there's neuroplasticity. We're learning new things. We're pruning some things. We're learning new things all the time. And so, we can always grow our mindset. The problem is when you feel like you have a fixed mindset, you feel stuck. And oftentimes there's some sense of grief or fear or sadness or loss, depression that is holding you back from having more of a growth mindset. And so the emotions are actually holding you back from growing and from experiencing it, which is totally understandable because, really at the end of the day, these emotions are their information for our brains to say, oh, I don't want to try this new thing because I remember when I tried a math problem. This actually happened to me when I was younger. I tried a math problem in class. It was long division. And I got so upset that I didn't know how to do it. I started crying and I was so embarrassed because I was in front of all the students and I'm crying and I'm just like so upset. And I kind of ran out of the classroom. And, luckily the teacher followed me, checked in on me and said, you can do this. It's okay. This is not easy. It's not hard. Now, had I had a fixed mindset and said, no, I couldn't do it, well, you wouldn't be seeing me here today. That's for sure. But because I had that support and that like encouraged a growth mindset that, oh, other people have problems with this and I can do this too. And so learning that you can have that, you can increase that growth mindset, particularly when you have the support of somebody else. And that's, I think, why therapy is so helpful, because you do have the support of a therapist who does believe that you can grow and that you can like do better and that you can, understand yourself in whatever way and live a better life. And change circumstances. And I think that that's the most helpful thing is having that person there for you to kind of support you in that. And that helps to facilitate a growth mindset.
Yeah, I think even if in that context, like I guess that's why they have like the buddy system in the 12 step the 12-step process for even like AA, just having someone,
Mm-hmm.
or even like in the gym, just having a workout buddy, just having someone there to sort of like, build you up when you kind of want to take the easy way, or just kind of just, you know, I think it's just human nature, like when we sort of make any progression, to take it in and like bask in its glory, and then just like, okay, sit back and be like, all right, now we can take a break. But then when we have someone like, okay, all right, no, get up, we got to do this, it's not over, and then uh we sort of like build that discipline. So I think that in that way it's really important, especially now. There are a lot of people who really don't know how to handle this or tackle this, because uh, for one, I didn't understand it at first, and then I was really just trying to understand people, and then I understand where they're coming from, and when they're coming from like these places, they're coming from like an authentic place. They're genuinely fearful of, what are they going to do, how are they going to support their family, and these things. So you could only imagine the worries and fears they have, but trying to really shift their mind and
Mm-hmm.
make them, change, not change, but like, make them see like the other way, and that, there is a possibility. How do you sort of have the patience in like, just like, okay, it's okay, like if you fall, get up, try it again, and just,
Mm-hmm.
being patient as well as being nurturing, rather than like coming from like a uh any other place, like, like even if you wanted to, I always said, like, even if you wanted to give someone like constructive criticism, rather it'd be better not to do any criticism, like, like go at it a different way, because our tone is, like, it's like, I think it's like 45% body language, 45% tone, and like 15% words, and then
Mm-hmm.
it's trying to keep that all in play, and trying to be mindful in the conversation and still help that person.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, those are some really good points, and it's so true that you do have to be mindful, and understanding and compassionate. That's a big one, and empathetic. And I think first and foremost, I mean, just to go back to my own process, and it's been just having that for myself, having self-compassion and empathy, and recognizing that I am a human, and these are like normal human feelings and emotions that we all have. And being able to sit with them for yourself helps you to be able to sit with them, with other people. And I think that that's where that patience comes in. Is there's this concept called holding space. And holding space really means that you just are sitting with somebody. You don't necessarily have to be saying anything, but you're just present with them. Maybe you say a few encouraging like words, that's hard. It's difficult to feel like that, because it is difficult to feel like that. To feel those negative emotions that we feel, that are normal as humans. So, it's kind of sitting with yourself first and foremost, and then being able, that helps you to sit with other people. So, any kind of emotions that I have, of course, like, in certain instances, I can't necessarily deal and process them with them at the same time, but I have to go back and say, oh, during that session, that brought up a lot of sadness, for example, and it reminded me of the loss of my grandmother when I heard, my patient tell me the story about the loss of their grandmother or grandfather. Like you kind of have to be aware of those things, put that to the side, help the person process their feelings and sit with them, and then go back and look at your own. And I think that that's why therapy is such a helpful thing to do, because we don't normally have that for ourselves. We don't normally have people in our lives that will sit with us in that way.
Yeah, no, that's really paramount in the aspect of I guess you can't really be there or like even listen to anyone if you first can't be by yourself and listen to your inner self, and then when you're finally in tune and you got yourself in the right key, then you can sort of like be there, not meaning like, like you can physically be there, but like also just you like you said, not, you don't even have to say anything, just like shaking your head or like, I didn't understand how important it is to like listen, and how so many people just want to be heard. Like I had spoken to this rabbi. He gave a TED talk. His name is Rabbi Yonasan. He said when he came back from his school in Israel, he he was curious and he wanted to know how to understand people. So he decided
Mhm.
to hitchhike across America. And he noticed one thing was that when he didn't have a sign, no one really stopped him. And when he had a sign, people sort of stopped him. So his like perception on that was like, when you sort of know where you're going, like you have a destination, people will want to come along with you. And then the next thing was that just being in these truck like these huge like semi trucks and listening to these people, he came to the conclusion that like a lot of people just really want to be heard, and not a lot of people are being heard.
Yeah, that's it. That really resonates. I think that that's so true. Yeah.
So with like psycho like therapy and this approach on like a holistic healing, how would you say like compared to other like psychotherapists, like how is your like style or your demeanor different from theirs?
Oh, that is a very good question. It's so hard to know. I have to say, of course, like, we all have our personalities, and so my personality is definitely involved. Not as much, it depends upon what school of thought that you come from. People who are more psychoanalytically oriented, which is like the more Freudian, where you're sitting on the couch and the therapist is behind you and you don't really see their reaction and you're kind of free associating. That's not the kind of therapy that I could ever do, or or resonates with me. I do more like kind of psychodynamic, which is really interactive. Interpersonal is a part of that, where we talk about different things that might come up even between me and the patient or the person that I'm working with in the session, and it's helpful. Like, look, I disclose things sometimes. I talk about things that I've been through or experiences that I've had that I think could be really helpful for people. Because I think one of the things is that, kind of going back to what you were just saying about listening, is, not only do people feel like they don't have anybody to listen to them, they feel alone. People just really feel alone. And I would say, just like we all have ears and eyes and a heart and all these different like physical attributes that all make us humans, we have the same emotional attributes. So feeling lonely, not feeling heard, feeling not good enough. Like there's like, many of us feel those feelings. And so, sometimes I think that psychoeducation about, just being a human, just generally, a lot of times we don't feel like, we feel so alone that we have those feelings and no one else has those feelings. Just kind of normalizing that. And sometimes it's hard, it's just by saying, oh, well, people feel like that all the time. That doesn't really quite get that. Sometimes you have to tell a story that helps people to understand, oh, there was an experience that somebody else you knew or that I had, personally, and I'll share that with them, especially when I know that they're having a hard time accepting that, other people could potentially be experiencing this. And part of it is because, we also, we're individuals, and, we do have our own individual way of, things that have happened to us and experiences that should, kind of make us who we are. But we also have this shared consciousness and we can get like those intertwined, you know? So some people will say like, oh, you know, I feel depressed. No one feels like this. And it's like, no, actually depression is a common feeling that many people feel. And it comes from the core feeling of sadness, which, by the way, as a species, if we didn't have that core feeling of sadness, we wouldn't be where we are today. We wouldn't be connected to other people. We wouldn't have the socialization and the world that we have, that we've created together, if we didn't have that core feeling of sadness. Because part of what they think, and you know, again, some of this stuff is you know, we're still learning about it, we're still researching about it, but sadness is actually a way, experiencing sadness is a way of bringing people together and connecting people.
Okay. But then wouldn't you say that some people would be like, starting with this notion, or like trying to come on like a, okay, this is what it is. You're kind of um, saying it's okay. I'm not trying to say that it's not okay, but rather you kind of want them to sort of say, okay, it's okay, but know that, like, you know, it's like the law of thought, like our we can only focus on one thing at a time, whether it be a positive or a negative. We can choose to change that negative thought with a positive thought. So like, rather than having them, you know, letting them just focus in on the sadness and depression, because then I feel like when you sort of do that, then they sort of fall in this hole, and then they like, it's like, okay, and it's like, why me? Then it like, you know, that's sort of like, you don't want to go down that rabbit hole either. Rather, you want to have them like shift their mind into realizing, okay, it's actually a mindset is actually it's a thing. It's like there's a strategy. There's like, you know, like there's a game plan behind it. And if I don't figure out how to use this like playbook of the mindset, then like um you know, the next team of like uh self you know, like lack of self-confidence or sadness and depression, they're gonna beat my mindset, and then I'm gonna lose the championship.
Well, right. Well, it depends upon the context. So remember we were talking about holding space for somebody.
Okay.
So that space that you hold for somebody, like that, you know, for example, like you were just talking about it, that why me? You do have to say that, like, why me? And you have to feel the feelings of sadness or fear or anger or whatever that feeling is, because what doesn't get expressed gets repressed, and it gets stuck in your body. It gets stuck in you act it out. So it's funny because, you know, one of the top things that people say when they talk about therapy and not wanting to go to therapy is they're so afraid that they're going to drown in all of their negative emotions, and they're not going to be able to like function, and they're not going to be able to deal with it. And I remember, it's funny because I worked at a clinic for a long time, and I saw my therapist when I first started seeing her. I started work at 11 and I saw her at 9:45. And I was like, oh my gosh, that only gives me like a half an hour to get myself together so I could see my own patients. and I remember telling her, I'm like, I don't know if I could see you before then. I feel like I'm going to be like a huge mess. And I was at times, right? But the beauty of therapy, and I think that what people might not understand, and this is good we're having this conversation, is that it's contained. It's contained. Your emotions will be contained. You think that you're not going to be able to control them and that they're going to go like off the rails, and they might. And then, you know, then you just need a little bit more support. But usually it's contained within the room. You know, you kind of like, you talk about it, we hold space, you process it. And sometimes it takes, honestly, Amara, I would say it will take a couple of sessions or many months where, you know, you go back and forth from feeling like a huge mess and like, you know, not having it together, to saying, okay, what can I do now to like move forward? And then the next week, maybe, you know, you feel like a huge mess again. You know, again, things are not linear. And so I think when we're working with your feelings are important, and being able to just sit with them, and I love self development I have with it is that emotions are totally disavowed and not dealt with. So it's like, okay, you know, change your mindset and change your state, and then, you know, you felt like that you had that loss, but whatever, just brush it off and then forward.
Okay, that had me go down a different way of thought, as in you, it's like with anything then, right? Like when
Talking to, you know, friends can help in some ways. But I do think that therapy is unique in the sense that I can listen to somebody talk about a breakup for years and I have, by the way, years and years, or the loss of a parent, or the loss of an animal for years, because it still profoundly affects them, but they do move forward.
okay,
It feels like, it might feel like to them or to the layperson kind of outside, that they're not moving forward, but they are. They're processing their feelings. So I think that yeah, and look, I like what you said earlier too about self-discipline. I think that there is room for that in this process. It's just that there's these other steps, and actually I kind of laid them out before, and I can do it really quickly. Is the first part is self-awareness. So having self-awareness about yourself, having self-compassion is the second part. So understanding that that it's normal as a human to feel this way, and then accepting that this is where you are, this is who you are, and then the self-discipline is where do you want it to change. And that's, I think, kind of a great way to frame it in your mind, especially as, you know, you move forward in life. Talking about a survival guide to life, that's my survival guide to life.
okay, no, so it in that regard, then taking, you know, like trying to measure progression, yeah, you have to measure everyone's progression with what adversity they've been through, or like things they've been through, so you can't really have one and be like use that same, you know, system, or that same way of measuring their success and how they're coping with their mentality towards another person. And it kind of made me think of the show Monk, you know. And like even after like it was like 4 or 5 seasons, like how much like progression he made in as in terms of like his OCD and things like that.
Right.
And just having, but having like it was like self-awareness and self-compassion, and finally saying, you know, you need the self-discipline, and you know where you're supposed to go. What, like in the terms of like as a patient, or I'm just trying to understand, like in terms of like a psychotherapist, and like what is the approach like in how to handle that as a patient, if you sort of like, you know, see these like things and stuff, do you sort of like try to find like, okay, now what's the cause, or like what, like why does this keep coming back? No, you've kind of like they've talked about this, and they made it clear that, you know, and then you could say they've come to terms with it, but now you sort of see this like repeat pattern, but like in other areas of the life. Is that happen now? And then that's where you sort of like then go to see that, okay, it's just the way that they're looking at any like any situation in those terminologies, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, so it's about understanding kind of the patterns that people have and how they will react to certain situations. Because you'll notice, I mean, you will notice that you have similar reactions to similar experiences in your life, right? So I think sometimes it's hard because we don't really quite see that like outwardly, or inwardly actually, but outwardly people will see it. Like, your friends will tell you, oh my God, why are you dating that person? That's the same type of person that you dated before. She's just like Mary, who you dated 2 years ago, or, and interestingly enough, another amazing aspect of that is that we're creatures of habits, and we continuously uh, are attracted to and have similar like patterns in certain kinds of people. And so if you have an awareness of that, and you can develop an awareness of that pattern, the pull of the chemistry and of like love is so strong that you almost don't realize that that you're kind of dating a similar person that you were dating before. And then it's not until you take a step back and you start looking at that, and you're like, oh wow, there's a lot of similarities here with these people, or friends even, or jobs. A lot of people have the same type of job where they get into the same issue with their boss, and then they're wondering like, okay, why am I doing this? And that is where the good stuff is, because that's when you can say, oh wow, I'm doing this again, why am I doing this, and what does this bring up for me? And usually it's like, kind of unfinished, unresolved issues with your primary caregivers, your parents. And I know that most of the time there's a ongoing like joke in therapy, oh, it's like it's your mother's the problem. It's not necessarily that. What it is really is that we come in as a being, not as a blank slate, but we learn every things that we need to learn in order to get along in the world and to get along with other people through our parents and our siblings actually as well, and people that are around us. And so those dynamics get ingrained in us. And sometimes we are attracted to what's familiar in some ways, or we can, avoid what's familiar. Like, if your, father loved to go golfing, and you had a bad relationship with your father, any man who golfs that you try to date, you're not that for whatever reason, that's like an immediate turnoff for you. I mean, that's just like a simplistic example, but there's some that, there's more, more personality issues that come up, but that's kind of like a little bit of a something that happens, I think, for a lot of people, and they don't really realize that until they recognize that they're with the third or fourth or job or boss or friend or partner that's and reliving the same issue.
No, that's it's it's something that needs to be taken with a lot of care, because I used to sort of like have these thoughts, and like, sometimes you get angry and then you try to like play this blame game, and then you like want to push it away. But then if you take a step back, and then you, like you said, like, when you listen and then you try to come from a place of understanding, if it, say whether, for example, say be parents, like this is the first time that they're in this situation, like with a child. And how would you be if you were them? And like imagine,
Mm-hmm.
like all the struggles and hurdles, and they were just, they're just trying to understand it themselves, and trying to do it to the best of their abilities. And or like maybe it's like your boss, like maybe he's like at this terms, like, it's like maybe like times like this coronavirus, and like business maybe not so good. So like I think that's where we have to really be like as humanistic, or like, like as empath like come from a lot of empathy, and
Mm-hmm.
use the same empathy we use for ourselves on other people, because it's like we sort of have like this two ways. And it's like we like anything that's like for us, it's like, oh, okay, we just like abundance of empathy. And then when now it's time to like for someone else, it's just like, all right, pull out this microscope and like start picking
Right.
away. And in that aspect, I guess it's just like us, like humans. Now, my next question was like, when you took your like trip abroad and to like India and stuff, what was that like? And like, um, who what was like so who was Victoria like before the trip, and like where was her head at, and like like what was like sort of her mentality, and then like going through these experiences and like living through it, and then like the flight back, like just see if you could like walk me through it, because I was just curious, because it must have been a profound moment in your time.
It really was, Amar. It really was actually. And it's funny because as you were saying that, you're like, who was Victoria before India? Who was Victoria after? I think at the time I didn't recognize that I had changed, only since I've kind of processed my life a little bit, that was, I mean, okay. So what happened was, before India, how I got even going to India, because I went to a community, no, I'm sorry, a very small college in upstate New York, Colgate. And there wasn't a lot of diversity, to be honest with you. And me and my friend, we loved to dance. And so we loved Indian music. We saw these girls from of Indian descent, and they had a dance troupe called the Nagina Dancers. And me and my friend, we just loved the dancing because it was very similar to hip hop, and the music was really major that was applicable. I happened to be majoring in religion and psychology, so I went to India because I really wanted to dance, and they were going to do Bharatanatyam. I don't know if you know anything about Bharatanatyam, but it's a South Indian dance that is very old and very complicated, where you're basically in a squat position dancing all these like dance moves. It's no Bollywood dancing. It's very complicated. So it was a great experience because I got to try some things that I never would have tried before, be in a culture that I never probably would have, a country that I never probably would have gone to, I would imagine, coming from upstate New York. But anyways, so, in India, there's quite a few people, actually, many people, and there's all kinds of classes. There's a caste system in classes, and you don't necessarily kind of see, I mean, you do see that in America, but it was very pronounced there. There was a lot of sad moments where I saw kids begging for money, and you don't really necessarily see that here in the US. So it really just opened up my eyes to a lot of different aspects of humanity, and to the culture, and to suffering in many ways. And not that I hadn't suffered, in my own life, but it was a different type of suffering. And one thing that was clear was community and family being very important. And so when I left India, the shortly after, I decided that I was going to go to social work school, because that seemed to be in alignment, after going there and learning about their culture and learning about connecting with people and how to kind of help. So that really spoke to me. And I wanted to focus particularly on families and children. I thought that would be something that I'd be the most interested in. However, that changed as my career, the trajectory went more towards mental health. But that I think that's probably how India has impacted me the most, is just really just seeing society and culture in a different way, and trying to see where I could be of service and help.
Oh, okay. So that makes a lot of sense. As in, you like being in America and stuff, you just see all these things that normally we don't really pay so much attention to, or we don't really appreciate too much. And like going somewhere like there and seeing the state they're in, as in, like, like the littlest things, that something that, we wouldn't even look at, or, it wouldn't even like come in our mind, has a huge impact on them. And, they'd be so appreciative for, like, and it sort of makes you wake up, and you sort of like, I have all these, like, like blessings, or I have like all these like things that, like, I'm not really grateful for, and it sort of brings you into this like attitude of gratitude. And then that's when you sort of like
Hmm.
then can really like come from an authentic place, because you don't really understand someone really until, right, and then it's like when you see the kid, like the kid who doesn't really have anything to eat, but he like rips his food in half and still gives it to you. I think in that way, that makes sense. So in like coming there, and then now, and with the pandemic, and I'm sure like people or clients or just patients or even like family or anyone that's like coming and asking you, as in general, like freaking out, or just trying to like get from this flight or fright, factor, and just like come to ease. How have you just like sort of like, tell like everyone in passing, as in like your friends and family, and it's just like, okay, all right, just be resilient. It's like, it's one thing to say, all these things to everyone, but then, like, also just like understanding, like, I know it must be also hard, as in like, just because you're there, I'm sure like people would just be like, oh, okay, so now Victoria, like, I need the like they like want to talk to you, like, and then you're like, okay, I know, but like there's probably like a time where you just like, you kind of want to like back away from, or like you need your time to like unwind, right? So like, what are the things that you sort of do, so you don't come off like I don't the right way, like like, someone like who's rude, but like you still like give time for yourself and do justice for yourself.
Right. That is such a great question, Amar. And it's so funny because I'm visiting my family right now. So I've been practicing a lot of this. It's really just being mindful and present. And so most of the time, people are just curious about themselves. So, I always like, again, I have compassion for other humans as I'm a human. So I know that, like, if somebody asks me a question or has like a problem or starts talking about something, I can give, and it took me a while to actually learn this, because I didn't have such great boundaries in the beginning, because I was like, oh, I can help them, and let me help them. But it's, I can help in a very limited way, and give resources and give a little bit of time, but setting that boundary. And I think just being, for me, the opposite was more true, where I was just kind of giving unsolicited advice, and I still kind of do that, especially with my family. And that's why I've been practicing mindfulness and being present, and just kind of sitting and holding space, and not necessarily, judging or saying anything, and just kind of like being present and being there and being mindful, and asking myself, if, is this helpful to them, or is this just going to make me feel better and satisfy my ego, right? So that's been very helpful. And again, it's really about understanding yourself. Like, I really just want people to feel better at the end of the day. Like, and I'm sure many people have that goal in their lives. But my job is actually to help people to feel better in many ways. And so when I see opportunities for that, I can't help but want to do that. But I have to have an awareness. Okay, that's the drive that I have, to want to do that. But is that an appropriate time for me to do that? So it's kind of like, constantly being aware of what's coming up. And that's why that the mindfulness practice is really important, and being present and open. That, like, has been a godsend. It's been so helpful.
So in those terms and what you said, like, I feel like anyone can take it and they can put it in any aspect of their life. Like, what is really the level you're coming at with this? Are you now really trying to help them, or are you like, trying to just like make yourself like feel better, or like do it for yourself in a way? And then that's where I guess it comes with time, and you kind of sometimes we lie to ourselves, or like we kind of like, oh, okay, either you're talking about growth mindset and fixed mindset, and then like say you're talking about it, someone's listening, like, oh yeah, growth mindset, yeah, I have that, I have that, and then like all of a sudden, like then boom, they're like listening in the car, and then say they like rear-ended someone, and they're like, oh, why does this happen? And then it's like you kind of like trick yourself, and then you have to, I guess it comes with time, and like it's not something that's just easy, and I kind of I have to like make myself realize it's like the mind really is like a brain, and it's repetition.
Right.
No,
Yeah.
so coming towards the end, and like trying to wrap it up, just like few more questions, like has there ever been like a time, like times where you like wish like pay, or like kind of wanted patients to ask like these, like a certain question, or like go down this like road, but then it kind of like and you think it's like about to happen and they don't?
Yeah, sometimes.
Oh,
Sometimes. Because I like talking about this stuff, because I think that, we don't take a step back from our lives. And we think that what's happening like right now is, and I get it. I get it. I've been there many, many times and still get there many times, often. But we think that this moment is our life, and it's not. And so, my purpose is trying to help people to see that, like, we are so much bigger than the moment. And what do we want our lives to actually like really look like? What kind of impact do we want to have on the world? And not even like a big one where we have to have like, $1 million or billions of dollars or whatever, to contribute, being a philanthropist or anything like that. It's just like, your actions affect other people, and knowing that is really important. And your actions affecting other people, how do you want that other person to react and to be? And do you want them to be good in the world, or do you want them to be like upset and angry and depressed and overwhelmed by everything? And then that they put that on other people. Because like I talk, just to go back to the first thing that we were talking about, is the cognitive, the physical, behavioral, and emotional, and this energy think that we pay a lot of attention to. So just bringing these conversations out into the world is just so helpful in helping people to take a step back about what their lives look like. I actually happened to watch Soul last night. Have you seen that yet?
no, okay, tell me more.
Oh my gosh. They did it again.
Oh.
So Pixar, Disney, they have the movie Inside Out, which I love, is about emotions. And this movie, Soul, is about a person who almost dies in an accident, and then his soul, and it's a story about what happens to your soul. And so it's amazing. They did such a great job. And it's the same question. It's like, what did like your life every day is basically a miracle, like to be here. And how are you living your life? With whatever issues and problems and things that you have going on, can you still take a moment to celebrate? Like, I'm looking at the snow outside, like, like that there's like these moments in our lives that we just like don't have gratitude for and don't feel thankful for, and they just kind of like se fue, they leave, they just take off, and you don't like really hold on to it. And I think that movie did a really great job of expressing that. And that's, at the end of the day, what I hope to help people to understand. So maybe I can't do it in a session with the patient at the time because they're like processing the loss of their grandmother. So they're not like, you know, thinking about this whole like concept of, you know, the world and, you know, their space in the world. But eventually, you know, we do get to that point to talk about that. And that's kind of, and it's hard, right? Because this is how I see the world, right? This is my perception of the world. And everybody's is different, but you know, unless you know, somebody tells me different, you know, this is what I think is kind of what matters, right? Is like giving to each other and moving us forward in terms of consciousness and awareness about, you know, being of service and connecting and loving and taking care of one another.
No, with that, you said something that I think everyone should, you know, like sort of try to bring in their daily practices and like try to sort of step back and take this bird's eye view. And it's like we're always like, all right, what's next? What's next? You know, like worried about what's next and trying to go on to the next thing. We never really stop and like, you know, we may be on a vacation, like looking like the oceans at like the top of the mountain and not really seeing like what's in front of us and enjoying that and like basking in that glory. And rather we're like, oh, okay, so 11 o'clock, we got to go there. And like, so to just appreciate those little wins. And I keep seeing it over and over again. It's not until you start celebrating those little wins where you'll start getting the bigger ones, because you need to start appreciating those ones before more can come. And
Yeah.
With that, would you? I always ask the guests, like, say you're watching this video now, like a year from now, and you know, what do you want to tell future Victoria, and then like sort of like bring it into existence, or just like, you know, hey, how's it going? Like, this is what you're doing, and this is what you did.
Right. I honestly just hope to continue to do what I'm doing, reach as many people as possible, and that's why I'm so grateful that you asked me to be on your podcast. I really feel very very honored. So thank you. And just to keep on doing, yeah, this where, you know, just helping people to see that, like, you know, I get so frustrated when they talk about mental health and I think actually COVID, one great thing about COVID that happened was everybody was affected, and people were depressed and not sleeping and not eating or not taking care of themselves, having anxiety. Not that I wanted that, but but what it showed was it's a normal reaction to extraordinary circumstances.
No, yeah.
And that's what I want to know, that like I was a part of helping people to understand that, like, hey, look, just because you have depression or bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, or whatever, you know, whatever diagnosis, you know, you do have, there are normal reactions to the environment and stimulus of whatever's going on, whether it's externally or internally in your brain. So just giving people that information and continuing to give people that information, I think that is what I would be proud of, I guess, you know, for my future self.
No, that's something to be very proud of, and it's like a very noble thing, because, you know, not it's so many times where we're just focused on ourselves, even in our occupation. You know, you sort of like, it's like, you know, putting on your mask before the other like thing, but rather than like, okay, let me just put on their mask, it's okay. And it's really, I think, underappreciated and undervalued. Like, you know, they say like the healthcare workers are the superheroes, but really, like, you know, the therapists, the psychologists, and then the ones who really just sit there and like have the patience to, you know, listen and like come from a place of understanding, and, you know, not getting angry, or not, you know, not getting upset. It takes a lot, and a lot of like work. So, you know, I want to commend you for that. And then the next thing is two truths and one lie. So any two truths and one lie, and then I'm going to try to guess which one's the lie.
Okay. Okay. a first statement is when I was 16, I worked at McDonald's. Oh gosh, I have a hard time lying. So the second is I have two dogs, and the third is I believe that everybody can change and change for the better.
You worked at McDonald's when you were 16. You don't have two dogs.
Yes, very good. I don't have two dogs.
Okay. No, because I was gonna get. I was like, okay, maybe. I would say something like, okay, now I don't think anyone could change for the. Not everyone could change for the better, because there's like there, just as we have positive people, like there has to be a balance, and there needs to be negative people. So I was thinking that, but then I was like, okay, maybe one. And then the last thing is, if you could just like send us off with a quote, maybe something you came across recently that's sort of been resonating with you.
Oh, yes. I have this great quote that I just got from Nelson Mandela. And it is, oh, I'm so sorry. I just bought this, and I know you reminded me too. I'm so sorry. You're
No, you're fine. It's okay. I can edit this part out.
It always seems impossible. Yeah, I know. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine.
Okay. I have it. It's okay. It always seems impossible until it's done. And I love that quote because it reminds me of machines, and once we've done something, we can store it in our brain. Our brain says, oh, we did that before and that was okay, or we did it before and it did turn out great, but maybe this time will be different. So I think it's always what he says, it's always seems impossible until it's done, is really a function of how our brain works, and that if we do something, then we know that we can do it, and that we can even do more than what we think or even dream is possible. And so that's the quote.
I like that quote, and it's a great way to end the show. And thanks for sharing your insight and giving us like a little deeper look into what this is and what it really entails, and how you win in life, physically, spiritually, mentally, and physically.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, Amar.
Physically, mentally, spiritually, financially, consistently.